Welcome back to Piers Morgan Uncensored. Taking a bold stand against the unsporting treachery at Lord's on Sunday by the Australian cricket team. The Australian press in turn has taken an equally bold stand, well, against me. Take a look at this morning's Daily Telegraph in Sydney has dressed me, Ben Stokes, Sir Geoffrey Boycott and Rishi Sunak as giant babies with the headline, a wobbly lower lip, Suki Poms keeps spitting the dummy. Well, I'm joined by Chief Cricket Writer of the Australian, Peter Lalor. Well, Peter, great to have you on the show. You were on your podcast yesterday saying I've been ignoring all messages from radio and television. I'm only disappointed I didn't have enough time to go on Piers Morgan's show. I'd have loved to have gone on that. It would have been very entertaining. Well, now's your chance to see how entertaining it's going to be, Peter. Right, let me start with this. I want to show you again what happened. Just to remind everybody, this is what went down. Here we go. So,
another short ball.
For those who don't play a lot of cricket, what's happened here? Johnny Bairstow doesn't even try and hit the ball. He just ducks. The ball goes over his head. He then scrapes his boot inside the crease. You see him here from this angle. So when he scrapes his boot, he's denoting the fact it's the end of the over. 6 balls have been bowled. They're going to change ends. Scrapes his boot. Everyone in world cricket history knows that denotes that the batsman is marking his crease. And then he goes up to walk to his captain. And at that point, I don't blame the wicketkeeper, Mr. Carey, for what he did. He instinctively threw the ball. Fine. The person I blame, Peter, is your captain, Pat Cummins. And here's why. 3 years ago, the Australian cricket team were in total global disgrace over Sandpaper Gate. I think you were pretty censorious yourself about it. And here we have a chance, 3 years on, for the Australian team to show that they really have changed their spots and actually do believe in the spirit of the game, sometimes overriding the basic laws. What happened? Why didn't Pat Cummins withdraw that appeal and bring Johnny Bairstow back? You don't, in your guts, feel comfortable about what you saw, do you?
100% comfortable. Anybody who plays cricket, Piers, knows that the over's not over until the umpire calls it over. There's a lot of people making a lot of noise about this and sounding like you, but there's Michael Vaughan, Michael Atherton, Nasser Hussain, Andrew Strauss, 4 people who have a few things in common. They captain England and they agree with Australia's position on this. It was out. He was dopey. It was dozy. It was stupid.
Well, hang on. On all of those, I agree with you. He was out, he was dopey, he was dozy, and he was, from a cricketing perspective, stupid. I don't disagree with any of that. I think what my wider point, though, is that given everything that the Aussies have been through with their cricket team in the last few years in terms of the spirit of the game, right? And downright cheating, frankly, with the Sandpaper Gate. I don't accuse the team of cheating this time. I didn't like the scenes in the Lord's Pavilion. It's not cheating. But I would equate it to what happened with Trevor Chappell in, I think it was 91, wasn't it? When he was captained by his brother Greg and they were playing a one-day international against New Zealand, and Trevor Chappell was directed by his brother to bowl the last ball of the match where New Zealand wanted 6 to win, to bowl it underarm. And he bowled underarm. And he created such a furore that even the older Chappell brother, Ian Chappell, condemned it on the commentary box. Richie Bano called it one of the worst things he'd ever seen. Both Prime Ministers of both countries condemned it. In fact, Muldoon, the New Zealand Prime Minister, said that he thought it was appropriate Australia were wearing yellow shirts and so on. And they changed the law as a result. Isn't this the same? Where you've got something which is technically within the rules. It's in the laws of the game. But everybody felt uncomfortable. And you cite all the captains of England who defend it, fine. The public, to a man and woman that I've spoken to, all think this was wrong.
Trevor Chappell's act was an extraordinary act, and I think we all condemn it. This is
hang on. Sorry, just on that point.
Johnny Bairstow attempted...
Just on that point.
Hang on, Piers, you've been talking a lot.
No, I just on that one point, Murph Hughes tweeted today that he thinks it was completely justified what Trevor Chappell did. So not everyone thinks it was wrong.
All right, that's Murph. That's our Murph, yes. There's a joker in every pack. Johnny Bairstow attempts the same dismissals in the very same test match.
No,
he attempted it in the previous test match as well.
Not the same thing.
The batsman was out of their crease. He attempted to throw down the stump.
The batsman is taking guard outside the crease, and therefore he plays and misses. The wicketkeeper has a legitimate chance to stump him if he took guard outside the crease. Bairstow clearly here scrapes his boot inside the crease. He clearly scrapes his boot. Everybody knows what he's doing there. He is saying, I'm marking the end of the over, and both umpires have moved to move away. Right, come on, this is not the spirit of cricket. And you're a very experienced and very good cricket writer, and I just don't believe you. If it was the other way round, I don't think you'd be saying the same thing.
Happens every weekend in club cricket in Australia. I don't know what you do here. It's not up to Johnny Bairstow to decide where or when an over ends. It's up to Johnny Bairstow to respect the laws of cricket, which were written by the English, and to stay in his crease until it's safe to get out of that crease. If he wants to get out of that crease while the ball is live, he's fair game. I'm sorry. I think your country's kind of lost its mind over this, and I reckon it's a bit of a smokescreen, to be honest. You're 2-0 down in the Ashes. You've all been sort of doing handstands about this great new brand of cricket you play, baseball, and good on you. It's fantastic. It's exciting cricket. But it's face-planted in the Ashes. You're 2-0 down, and you're carrying on about a fly speck on a pulpit.
Well, we should have won in Edgbaston.
I don't understand what's going on.
Let me explain, just to defend Bazball, we should have won in Edgbaston, and if Ben Stokes catches line when he's on 2, it's all over. And secondly, in this last Test match, if you hadn't basically divvied out poor old Bairstow, we'd have won that match too. So we probably would have been 2-0 up.
Coulda, shoulda, woulda. You know, you talk about the spirit of cricket. The spirit of cricket talks about accepting the authority of the umpires, of creating a positive atmosphere in the way you play. I mean, I think that English cricket owes Australia an apology.
An apology?
Australian players' mothers... Yes.
But you just said yourself...
Acts of hooliganism.
You just said yourself that...
Absolute hooliganism at Lords.
Well, that I agree with.
Absolute hooliganism.
Okay,
from your members and from the public, and it's being spurred on by your team, who's attempting to cover up...
Let me respond.
...the fact that it lost... It's 2-0 down in
Let me respond. I agree that the behaviour of the members chanting cheat, cheat, cheat was wrong. They shouldn't have done it, and that is ungracious. But the idea you, as an Australian, are going to lecture us on the way crowds treat the opponents. I was at the Ashes in 2013-14, where a baying mob were literally baying for blood. And in fact, they were baying at one stage for my blood in the net against Brett Lee. So I won't take any lectures from you lot on how crowds behave.
Our crowds behave poorly too, but we're not claiming to set the standards. And I'll tell you what, our crowds haven't been jostling players as they attempt to get back to their dressing room. Did you know Stephen Smith's mother left the ground?
We've run out of time. I want to thank you for coming on, because very few others would come on. I appreciate it. The Ashes is now incendiary. Headingley will be an abattoir, and you lot are going down 3-2. Thank you for coming on, Peter Lalor.
Not a chance.
Start sobbing.
Not a chance.
Welcome back, and it is good to be back. The media scrutiny around this morning presenter Philip Schofield has been relentless since he stepped down more than 2 weeks ago. In sit-down interviews with The Sun and the BBC, he talked about losing everything after admitting an affair with a young male colleague.
I understand how Caroline Flack felt. Last week, if my daughters hadn't been there, I wouldn't be here.
Who knew on the team?
Nobody.
Well, today the key member of his team, of course, Holly Willoughby, his co-host, returned to this morning saying she feels shaken, troubled and let down.
I imagine that you might have been feeling a lot like I have. Shaken, troubled, let down, worried for the well-being of people on all sides of what's been going on, and full of questions. You, me, and all of us at This Morning gave our love and support to someone who was not telling the truth, who acted in a way that they themselves felt that they had to resign from ITV and step down from a career that they loved. That is a lot to process.
Well, we all know about stepping down from jobs we love at ITV, but there are big questions left to answer over this scandal. Or is it time to say enough is enough? Joining me to discuss all this is journalist and author Jenny Kleeman, Talk TV's Richard Tice, and Rosanna Lockwood, my stand-in. But not for long. Like all stand-ins, she's plotting and planning to seize the big chair. All right.
No comment.
Well, if you're not, you should be. Rosanna, what's your take on all this? I mean, I've been off for a week, reading about it, obviously, while lying on a sunbed, and it just reached a crescendo after Schofield gave his interviews. Well, I've known him a long time, 35 years. I wrote a biography of Philip Schofield, literally in the 90s. And I looked at the guy and I thought, you are completely broken.
Yeah.
And when someone is in that condition, even though I felt that his comparison to Caroline Flack was clumsy and he probably shouldn't have said that, he probably meant it. He probably did feel that he was genuinely, what's left? I may as well kill myself. What do you think of the whole thing? Where are we now with this story?
I mean, the question that you lined us up with was, should we still care about it? Is it too far now? I'd say it was too far a week ago. I was saying this when I sat in your chair this time last week. Why? Why do the public care about this? I don't really give two hoots about it. It's a television show. Perhaps a bit reductive. I know it's representative of other issues in society. I know people are interested, but sometimes what's in the interest of the public isn't what's in the public interest.
Richard?
For me, Piers, actually, he probably was right to give that interview because it highlighted to everybody just how he was feeling. And I think that was the moment at which actually people stopped attacking him and focused on what I think is the right thing to focus on, which is the appalling, incompetent leadership and management of ITV, which is actually a seriously important company and brand within the UK.
The one thing I know for sure, a lot of people at ITV knew about the rumours about this relationship. I mean, everybody knew at ITV, right? Let's be crystal clear. That building was abuzz with this for about 3 years, because 3 years ago, the National TV Awards in the ITV box, the young man concerned in this story confessed his undying love for Philip Schofield. Everybody knew that. So this idea that the whole management are basically going, we didn't know anything, come on.
There we are. That proves my point.
I know is not true.
I mean, she has presided over an absolutely catastrophic performance of this company. The shares are down 60%, the dividends down 40%. She's being summoned to the select committee. And yet, the non-exec directors, they're saying nothing. The company has said nothing at the corporate level about this.
And Dame Caroline, God bless her, she was the CEO when I left Good Morning Britain. And they put me in a position where I had to either apologise for disbelieving Princess Pinocchio or I had to leave immediately. There was no inquiry for me. It was just like, you either now publicly apologise for disbelieving Meghan Markle's lies, as it turned out, or you have to leave immediately. So I took the leaving immediately option. But what's fascinating is 2 days after that, after I'd left, the Telegraph newspaper runs a story that says that Meghan Markle had written to Dame Caroline on the Monday night before I left on the Tuesday, demanding my head on a plate. Nobody's thought to mention that to me. And had they had done, I wouldn't have been so hasty in leaving. I would have said, I'm not leaving because some princess tells you to make me leave, right? So now, to bring it up to full speed now, the same Dame Caroline McCall has repeatedly said in public that it had no bearing on the decision to force me out. That is a lie. If you're watching Dame Caroline, that's a lie. You know it's a lie. I know it's a lie. I don't want an ongoing fight with ITV. I had a great time at ITV, although I didn't even get a carriage clock when I left. Not even a carriage clock. But 15 years, not even a clock.
Yeah, but what would you do with a clock, Piers?
Even if you work in a factory, somebody gives you a clock, right? I didn't even get a thank you, right? At least Philip Schofield got 30 seconds of Dermot O'Leary on the Monday thanking him. I got nothing. I trebled the ratings, not even a carriage clock.
It seems the management and leadership...
But on a serious point, here's my... Well, it's a serious point. My point really is, my experience of ITV management from the top down is that when it suits them, they'll lie through their back teeth. Secondly, that the way they handle talent is morally schizophrenic. Depending who you are and how important they think you are to the firmament at any given moment, or how important your agency is, in the case of Philip Schofield, Ant and Dec, so on, people like that, Holly Willoughby, they look at all those things, they make moral judgments based on that kind of stuff. That's where they lose me. It's not consistent. There's no consistency.
Meritocratic?
Right.
The thing is that will all come out because there's going to be an inquiry.
Yeah.
And I think that's a really good thing that there is going to be an inquiry. I think if this had happened on the BBC, they would have had to have called an inquiry a long time earlier. I do think, though, that there has been a feeding frenzy which has been spurred by some people who have a personal beef or maybe jealousy of both Holly Willoughby and Philip Schofield that has allowed this story to have a momentum to go on and on in a relentless way that perhaps it doesn't necessarily...
Well, again, look, Philip Schofield made quite a lot of enemies. It's not a secret. I know quite a few people, mutual friends who can't stand him, right? And they really can't stand him. And they made no secret of it. Amanda Holden, Eamon Holmes, people like that, they can't stand the guy, right? So that was not a secret. But I wrote a piece...
People are chalk and cheese, though, Piers, as you know very well. You know, like some people...
Yeah, I prefer to be a pleasant surprise than a bitter disappointment. my argument about the ITV daytime firmament was that so many of them were just total fakes. I wrote this piece for The Sun when this first broke 10 days ago, that the whole thing is basically fake. Right? They're not real people, a lot of them. So they'll say to your face, I love you, I love what you do, you're so fabulous, Piers. And then behind your back, you hear almost immediately that they despise you and can't wait to get your job. It's like the whole edifice is fake.
Isn't a lot of broadcasting like that?
Yes, it is.
Yes, it is, it is.
And it's a lot of bosses telling you you're wonderful, you're wonderful,
Daytime
you're wonderful,
TV seems to have a particular
But in which case,
about it.
you normalise lying, and that seems to be what's happened here, is that the lies went on and on. You know, if something is fake, it's essentially a lie. And that's gone throughout the whole organisation. Can Holly really not have known?
Well, it's interesting. Her speech today reminded me, we've got a bit of it here, I think. Let's have Holly again, yeah.
Imagine that you might have been feeling a lot like I have. Shaken, troubled, let down, worried for the well-being of people on all sides of what's been going on.
I knew what it reminded me of. It was this.
Mitch Kessler, my co-host and partner of 15 years, was fired today for sexual misconduct.
All right, stay strong.
First and foremost, I want to offer our sympathy and support to the women. We are devastated that this happened on our watch, and our hearts are with you. And to you at home, I understand how you must be feeling, because I and the whole team here at the morning show are feeling the same way. Shock, disappointment, disbelief.
She's throwing me under the bus.
Well, I mean, apart from the white dress, which was a good touch, the angelic look. Look, I like Holly Willoughby. She's a good friend of mine. I've known Philip Schofield a long time, right? I like Holly, and she's in an impossible position. Right? She had to come back contractually and do what she did. It's just, again, I wrote in this piece like that, the speed with which people go from heroes in this game, right, where charities are falling over themselves to use them, to their people they think are their friends at work. I mean, here's a message: they're not in most cases. In most cases, they will chuck you under a bus and into a grave as soon as they look at you, while simultaneously ringing the bosses trying to get your job. Right? It's just what the nature of the beast is. It's ruthless, it's horrible, and we've seen it laid bare at its worst. But Rosanna, my question, I guess, we started with this, didn't we? At some point, you've got to move on from this. Unless something comes out, unless the young man concerned in this story that Philip Schofield had the affair with, unless he comes out and contradicts Philip Schofield's version of events, or somebody else comes out with new revelations, what else do people want? Philip Schofield is a broken guy.
Yeah.
He's not going to work on television again, almost certainly. He's lost everything in his life.
Yeah.
I don't know what more the baying mob on Twitter want from Philip Schofield that he hasn't already lost.
And that was what was so evident from that interview. He was an empty husk. And I agree with you, it's clumsy, the Caroline Flack comparison. But I remember watching her documentary where she used to go home after recording her shows and just read all the tweets and all the comments and feel emptier and emptier. And it just reminds you that, yeah, showbiz people, presenters, they're overpaid. It's a lovely life, but they're also human. And it really does kill someone's soul to be attacked like that mercilessly day after day. But I will say this, have the ratings for this morning ever been higher than they were this morning?
I don't know, we'll find out. I mean, the problem for Holly would be if they were gigantic for the first half a minute and then plummet. I mean, we'll see. Look, it's not funny for her. She's obviously being going through a very tough... It's tough. It's difficult. You're in an arranged marriage with these situations. I was in one myself. Suddenly you're divorced, right? It's a very, you know...
Really hard to maintain. And when you say what do people want? They want her destroyed. They want the show axed. And there are some people who have, you know, like proper professional beefs, or who want the job and are going to keep on going. As soon, you know, when the results of this inquiry are
and I'm not saying they're all going slightly nuts, but this was the boss of this morning, Martin Frizzell, who's a good guy, and from my experience. But this is how he reacted this morning to Sky News.
Tell you what's toxic, I've always found toxic, is aubergine. Do you like aubergine? Do you?
Is there a toxic work environment?
But do you like aubergine? Because I don't like aubergine. It's just a personal thing.
Is there a toxic work environment at this morning?
I've heard of whataboutism. That's a new one.
Well, somebody mentioned it might be an emoji reference. I don't think we really want to go there, but these situations do send everyone slightly nuts.
This probably goes quiet until the inquiry comes out. And if the inquiry finds that actually the management and the leadership and the board knew about this, then I think the whole pack of cards comes down and it's a start again.
You know, the hardest problem for Holly Willoughby will be who to replace him with, because poor old Susanna Reid, she's been through about 15 blokes now, and none of them live up to me. And that's a heartbreaking moment.
Hard act to follow.
You couldn't wait to say that, could you?
That up.
I was trying to say that with a straight face, and you're all like, oh, really? Oh, yeah. It's a joke. Mind you, when one of them was Alistair Campbell, you can quite understand it. My God. Talk about cratering the audience.
Maybe could she not do it, could she lead it and then have a sort of guest host each week?
Yeah. Well, that's what she's doing, I think. Anyway, look, we've got to leave it there. It's a fascinating scenario. I just think probably most people in the country now, if not the wider world, have just bored with it. They're bored.
They're done.
Short of a new bombshell, move on. Don't we think?
Yep.
I think so. Well, Ben Shapiro is here, live and uncensored. Well, that's quite an intro we've given you there.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it.
You better live up to it.
I look at that old tape and suddenly I hit puberty, right?
We both look so young.
Oh, my God.
That's probably over 10 years ago.
10 years ago.
Right.
10 years ago.
And it was interesting because I was at the time, getting very angry about a series of mass shootings in America with a British sensibility and saying, obviously my country, we don't really have any guns. And I was, hectoring and lecturing, I guess, Americans about their gun laws, and it went down as badly as that phrase would suggest, particularly with you. But what was interesting was when you came on, I thought, who's this snotty little kid who's going to start trying to take me on? And then it rapidly became clear to me you were a hell of a lot smarter than you appeared. So we've moved on from then. Anyway, we've had our kiss and make-up interview after that. But I think what was really interesting to me, 2016, so 7 years ago now, you tweeted a tweet, this is your pinned tweet to this date, simply said, facts don't care about your feelings. And if any phrase, I think, perfectly epitomises this woke era that we have somehow stumbled into, it's that. Because the woke brigade put feelings before facts. How do we get there?
Well, and culturally speaking, I think that what happened is that the value of subjective authenticity became the core to pretty much everybody. So the idea of individualism was taken to its logical extreme, which was, I'm so important and everything I feel is so important that I can ignore the rest of reality. And in fact, reality is an imposition on me. Institutions, rules, roles, the rules of the road, all that sort of stuff, it's an imposition on who I truly am. And in order for me to be actually free, I have to speak my truth. Now, as I've said and you've said, there's no such thing as my truth, right? There's your opinion and then there's the truth. But as soon as you start speaking in terms of my truth, as soon as you start saying, well, there's how I feel about the world and how I feel about the world is the core of me, what that also does is it means that other people are aggressing on you when they disagree with you. Because obviously a shared reality means that we can disagree about things out here, but, we sort of as human beings are intact. But the moment that you start to identify your truth with the truth, then anybody attacking your truth is attacking you as a human being. And I think that that's where we've gone, is this movement away from, we're having a political debate, but again, we can go out and have a drink afterward because we are not the political debate. The political debate's a different thing. To my politics are who I am, or my feelings about who I am, or my feelings about the world. That's the thing that matters more than anything else.
And what's extraordinary, I remember this, we're going to come to them later, sadly, but Meghan and Harry, when they went on Oprah Winfrey, and she started talking constantly about my truth, and Oprah was endorsing your truth and everything. I was thinking, I'm living in a sort of mad world where truth is no longer factual. It's just whatever you're feeling in any given moment. It seems such a perverse thing for a democratic society that you move away from fact-based, from science, whatever it may be, to just feelings dominating a culture. And if you defy those feelings, you are instantly branded the enemy and you must be destroyed.
Well, there's no conversation to be had, right? I can't have a conversation about your feelings. You're feeling your feelings. There's no way for me to dissuade you from
You can't deny my feelings.
Correct. I can't deny. I can deny the facts that you bring to the table. But the problem is, once that becomes irrelevant, then we're just at an impasse. There's no more conversation to be had.
How big a problem is it that at the same time, simultaneously, I think, you've had the rise of very populist leaders like Donald Trump, Boris Johnson in the UK, and others who play pretty fast and loose with the truth? That you have people who say, well, hang on, you talk about the sanctity of truth, but you've got these political leaders, US presidents, British prime ministers, where they don't seem to care about the truth. They just bumble through with whatever suits them from day to day. How dangerous is that to the whole shebang?
I mean, I think that is dangerous, but it's dangerous in a different way. And it's also dangerous in a more consistent and, I would say, historically precedented way. I mean, the fact is that politicians have always fibbed to us. I mean, there's nothing new about politicians saying things that are not true, from LBJ to George W. Bush to Donald Trump and Barack Obama. I mean, like literally every politician.
And Joe Biden. I mean,
to President Biden. Right? You see this all the time. So the idea of a politician not telling the truth or shading the truth in particular ways, that's not what's new. I think what's new is where people are presented with data and their immediate response isn't, let me bring you some data that rebuts that data, but I don't even have to look at your data because your motivation is bad. Right? This philosophy.
How dangerous is it, though, that we've also become incredibly tribal? I think more than I can ever remember in modern history, actually. You know, when I read your Twitter feed, I think you're always prepared to call out your own side if you genuinely feel there's been some egregious wrongdoing that they've done or a terrible mistake or whatever. But the number of people prepared to do that now, on social media in particular, is minuscule. Most people park themselves into their tribe, whatever that tribe may be, and there is no moving them. There's no deviation, even if the facts change. And again, it plays into, well, if your feelings are the facts, then if you feel that fact is wrong, well, that's enough.
Right. But the tribalism that I think has cropped up is rooted in a philosophy called emotivism, which is the idea that everybody's actual viewpoints are not driven by their view of the facts. It's driven by their internal emotions. What that allows me to do, on the converse, is attribute malicious intent to people that I'm arguing with. And it means that I get to ignore all of their facts. The reason that I'm disagreeing with you is because I'm good and you're a bad person. And what that means is that people on my own side, for example, they might be upset with me for talking with people on the other side of the aisle, because why would you talk to somebody who's a nasty person, who has bad motivations? And the same thing on people on the other side talking to me. I was having a conversation one time with a very, very large left-wing podcaster. This is probably 2018. And I said, we should really do like a crossover podcast for the midterm elections. We'll do huge business. And my side will be totally fine with it. It'll be great. And he said, your side will be fine with it. My side will kill me.
Right.
And that's probably
But that's
right.
the way it's gone. And Bill Maher said to me, that comedy used to be rooted really in right-wing extremism being comedic. And that was where liberal comics like him could get their material. Now he said it's mainly to the left. It's the woke area of politics that gives him the most comedic material. And he can't believe it. And as a liberal himself, he feels just really frustrated that they don't understand how ridiculous and laughable their positions on things have become.
Well, it's driving a bunch of people who consider themselves center or center-left into the arms of people who are more conservative, actually. I've made the point before that I think the future of the West may ride not on people who agree with me most of the time, conservatives, traditionalists. I think the future of the West might ride on people who consider themselves kind of traditional liberals, who may agree with some of the left's prescriptions economically, but who disagree with the way they want to get there, which is very often by silencing debate, using censorship, shutting things down. So the question is going to be, are they willing to put off utopia for a while in order to engage in the debate?
Because
the debate's more important.
I've always thought myself not really as a political ideologue, right? I think I'm pretty centrist and call out everybody, really. I see myself as a journalist, fundamentally, and don't think that being partisan helps that particular profession very much, as we've seen from those who've actually drifted down into being partisan as journalists. It doesn't work. You become an activist. But someone said the other day, are you a conservative? I said, well, I've never identified as a conservative. But the farther lunatic that the left woke go, the more the pendulum swings. And eventually we all get sucked into thinking, well, OK, actually, by comparison to this, I probably am getting a bit conservative because I think they're lunatics.
I think what's happening right now, and it's happening in a bunch of countries, is people are just craving any sense of normality.
And common sense.
And no one is providing it to them.
Right.
No one is providing it to them. They're taking a slap at the people who are responsible for the status quo as licensed to now do whatever they want. And so you're seeing the pendulum swinging wildly side to side, because if you're a political leader, you're trying to harness the passions of the moment to get done the thing that you really, really want to get done, when in reality, the population just wants things to kind of just stop. Just like, leave us alone and stop.
Right, I totally agree. And I think that's the majority of people. Right? I mean, today, Rolling Stone published an opinion piece on why cancel culture is good for democracy. And I read this piece and it was so completely deluded because, of course, cancel culture is the antithesis of a democracy. It's actually the antithesis of liberalism. You can't pretend to be liberal with what that actually was intended to mean and support cancel culture.
I think the left uses cancel culture in a very different way than most of us use cancel culture. When we talk about cancel culture, typically what we mean is you say something that they don't like on the air, and they decide to secondarily boycott your advertisers, or they go to your bosses and call for you to be fired. Right. And that's what we mean by cancel culture. What they mean is, well, we're allowed to disapprove of you. Well, sure, you're allowed to disapprove. Turn the channel. Right? You don't have to subscribe to Daily Wire. You don't have to watch your show. Right? But what they do with that instead is they attempt to get you kicked off the air, not by dint of lack of ratings or something, but just because they're so angry that they're going to go yell at people and bother them until you get kicked off the air. That's what cancel culture really is.
I interviewed Congressman George Santos this week, who, even by the standards of fibbing politicians, I mean, it was quite startling. I'll just play the clip where he admits to being a terrible liar. I've been a terrible liar. I mean, would you be prepared to say that?
Sure. Like I said, well, I've been a terrible liar on those subjects.
I mean, this guy's a serving member of the United States Congress. Right? He's one of the most powerful politicians in the country by default. And he just admitted to being a terrible liar, whether that meant just volume of lies or he's very bad at them, or in his case, uniquely, probably both. But what did you make of that? And should someone like him be allowed to stay in Congress?
I mean, I think that the voters are going to decide whether he gets to stay in Congress or not. I don't have a lot of standards for who gets kicked out of Congress by members of their own party because, frankly, I think that he's almost the apotheosis of what politics has reached, which is I'm going to lie as much as I can get away with it. And then the minute I can't get away with it, I'll just be like, well, I'm sorry I lied. I mean, that's really sad.
As a high-profile Jewish man, I want to play you the clip where he talks about being Jew-ish, where he separates the two parts of the word. Just have a look at this.
I'd always say I was raised Catholic, but I come from a Jewish family, so that makes me Jew-ish. I said it to a room with 1,000 people in November. People were hysterically laughing. It was funny to them. They loved it.
Now, the people have already said they were at that event and they weren't laughing with him. There's no sign of any evidence he has any Jewish heritage. He claimed his grandparents fled the Holocaust. There seems to be no evidence for that. His parents are both from Brazil. And this idea that somehow he can be Jew-ish, i.e. not actually Jewish, just ish.
Well, I mean, honestly, what he should have said is, on the inside, I feel Jewish. Right? I feel so Jewish on the inside. So I'm Jewish. I mean, what are you going to do? Challenge my feelings?
But he has repeatedly said he's Jewish. Yeah. I mean, and he wasn't joking. We've seen the clip, so he said it repeatedly.
Yeah. No. Again, I sort of see him as he's almost the apex predator of politicians at this point. He's reached the logical endpoint of where our politics is going. And it is the job of people like you or me to call it out when he says things that are not true. But I think that we have reached a sort of post-truth era, not in that people don't pay attention to the truth, but I'm not even sure how many people care about the truth. Now, I do think that can be exaggerated. I do think the bulk of the population really does care very much about the truth, and that's why I think that there's going to be a tidal wave of resentment that is about to crash across a bunch of society.
How important is the truth to you? Because you've got this huge following now, massive podcast, tens of millions of people watching your stuff on social media and so on. How important is truth to you now, that everything comes out of your mouth or that you write is fact?
I mean, it's the most important thing to me because I have to sleep at night. I mean, it's something that I try to think about as much as humanly possible is never lie to your audience. Never say to your audience a thing that you know to be not true, and try to follow the best data possible. And that does mean that you're very often having to be more nuanced than sort of the politics of the situation may allow. Because the easiest position in politics is always to take the hardest right or the hardest left position, the sort of most pure, most easily understood position, or to just play the easiest game of all, which is, again, my opponent is a bad guy. My opponent is a person who hates your guts.
When we had our dust up at CNN about gun control, for example, I'm not going to go over all that again, but had I been very different with you, if I'd been very, respectful and said, look, I'm a British guy, these aren't my laws, I'm just as horrified as you are by these massacres, and didn't talk about gun control, which I think has always been a terribly inflammatory phrase for many Americans. They don't want to be controlled. And they certainly don't want to hear a British accent telling them about how they should be more controlled. But if I'd phrased it as about gun safety, if that had always been the debate in America, how do you make it safer in a country that has 400 million firearms in circulation? Would that have been a more constructive debate, do you think?
I think it would have been a more informative debate. And the reason being, I think that clarity is very much opposed sometimes by passion. And we all get passionate about these issues. I'm not going to pretend I'm not passionate on my show, or I'm completely dispassionate in all circumstances. I'm obviously not. But, I think that would have allowed for the kind of discussion where we could have looked at data from various areas of the world, where have regulations been effective? Where have they not been effective? What are, as I said on the show, actually, at the time, I believe, what are the risks and rewards of particular policies? That's where the good discussion area, I think, gets done.
Just final point on the gun thing, but and I'm aware many viewers who watch this in America own guns and support
I own guns,
the Second Amendment rights and so on. Where do you see the line going? As you have all these massacres and as gun ownership increases, there's more guns in circulation. What do you do about that? I mean, as a country as big and powerful as America, what more can be done to just make it safer?
I mean, again, the measures that I've always suggested are measures that tend more toward the gun owner than toward the weapon itself, meaning that we obviously need better screening procedures for people who have a history of severe mental illness. We have red flag laws on the books, but they're not enacted. I mean, people don't actually practically follow the red flag laws, which is why I'm kind of skeptical of the idea that if we pass some more text from the legislature, that's magically going to translate into better action. What we need is more alacrity from the cops. I mean, how many of these mass shootings have we seen where there are 1,000 red flags and the cops go to the house and then they're told, well, no, we're not going to do anything. We're going to leave you back out there. It's almost in every circumstance. So we actually do need law enforcement to have more ability and will to carry out, for example, when they know somebody is severely mentally disturbed or somebody is shooting a gun at their mother, which we've had a case like that. That would be a time where you actually remove the person's guns and keep track of them, make sure they can't actually get guns. Right? I mean,
see, if I had my way again, when I was doing that debating, I would have had this kind of conversation. I can look back at those and realise I was letting my own emotions override.
We all have these. I mean,
yeah, but it's interesting, isn't it? I do think an important part of how we get to a better place as society now, away from this tribalism, away from all this stuff, is you've got to be prepared to have this kind of conversation, which doesn't end up with me just looking at you and shouting, well, you're a complete idiot because you don't agree with me, right? It's more complicated. It's more nuanced. Life is more nuanced than that.
I like to think so. And I think that, again, those conversations can be really, really productive. I try to make a habit. I have my regular daily show, but I also have a show called The Sunday Special that you've been on, in which I bring on a bunch of people who disagree, from Bill Maher to Anna Kasparian. And we actually try to talk through these issues. And
last time I came, and I found it a very surprisingly pleasant experience.
Yeah, exactly.
The woke mind virus is arguably the greatest existential threat that humanity faces. If you have the chance to sit down with arguably one of the most sought-after people in the world, then maybe you should approach it with a bit of pragmatism.
If AI does become sentient, it really could be Armageddon, couldn't it?
I think Elon and I see eye to eye when we say that much bigger than the COVID virus are the mind viruses that are burrowing in our brains.
Dan Saad is a professor, a best-selling author, an expert in evolutionary psychology, probably best known for his scathing and sardonic rebukes of contemporary cultural insanity.
Men now who have 9-inch penises can be women. They simply have to declare themselves women, and voila, they become women.
Millions enjoy his sarcastic diatribes on X. Elon Musk counts himself as a fan, and amid the fallout from Musk's disastrous interview with Don Lemon...
Do you believe that X and you have some responsibility to moderate hate speech on the platform?
I don't have to answer questions from reporters. Don, the only reason I'm doing this interview is because you're on the X platform and you asked for it.
The Hollywood backlash to Jonathan Glazer renouncing his Jewishness, and a cultural dispute about Sydney Sweeney, author of The Parasitic Mind, How Infectious Ideas Are Killing Common Sense, returns to Uncensored. Gag, great to have you back. How are you?
Oh, thank you. I'm doing well, Pierce. I'm still waiting for those invitations to go watch an Arsenal game together. I'm sure they're coming anytime.
You know what? We're going to win the Premier League, and you must come. I will definitely keep my word on that. Gag, let's start with this. I want to start with Jonathan Glazer. So this was a moment at the Oscars, probably the only political moment, actually, that happened all night. So you've got this guy who's an Oscar-winning director, and in his acceptance speech, he says this.
All our choices were made to reflect and confront us in the present, not to say, look what they did then, rather look what we do now. Our film shows where dehumanization leads at its worst. It shaped all of our past and present. Right now, we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked by an occupation which has led to conflict for so many innocent people. Whether the victims of October the...
So it's interesting, there was an outbreak of applause, but not by everyone, by any means. And there's now been an open letter response. I think over 1,000 people have now signed this. And it says, we are Jewish creatives, executives and Hollywood professionals. We refute our Jewishness being hijacked for the purpose of drawing a moral equivalence between a Nazi regime that sought to exterminate a race of people and an Israeli nation that seeks to avert its own extermination. So you've got a lot of backlash there to what Jonathan Glazer said. First of all, your reaction to that speech he made.
So let me contextualize it by giving a few similar situations that have taken place. Several years ago, a doctoral student at Hebrew University, a Jewish doctoral student by name of Tal Nitzan, was trying to demonstrate through her research that the IDF engages in rampant rape of Palestinian women. She did the research, and to her dismay, she found out that there wasn't a single documented case of an IDF soldier raping a Palestinian woman. You know what she concluded, Piers? She concluded that the IDF soldiers are so grotesque in their dehumanization that they're not even willing to rape a Palestinian woman. So if they had raped the women, they're evil. And if they don't rape any women, they're evil. That's what parasitic self-loathing is. Here's one more example. There's a gentleman in Norway that had been raped by a Somali immigrant in 2011, a man who had been sodomized by a Somali immigrant. When that Somali immigrant was going to be deported, the Norwegian man felt very, very guilty that he would now have a bad life in Somalia. So this is what Jonathan Glazer is doing. He's basically saying, please believe me that I'm a virtuous, progressive person, and in doing so, I'm rejecting my Jewish identity. You could be empathetic towards the innocent killing of any people without rejecting your identity. He's grotesque.
I mean, his movie was about the Holocaust. He says he's been misrepresented as to what he was saying. And I guess the overview in defense of him is, have we now reached a point where you can't, as a Jewish person, criticize Israel and its government and its actions in response to October the 7th without effectively looking like you're being disloyal to Jewish people?
No, I think it's perfectly fair to criticize endless Israeli policies. That's what makes it a vibrant democracy. But to say that I reject my Jewishness, listen, the people who wanted to kill us when I grew up in Lebanon wouldn't have cared about beheading me whether I rejected my Jewishness or not, right? If he had been at that music festival and said, hey guys, Hamas, don't kill me, I reject my Jewishness, they wouldn't have listened and been sympathetic to him. So you could both chew gum and walk at the same time. You could criticize Israeli policies all you want without comparing what's happening now in Israel and Gaza to the Holocaust, which is an offensive comparison, or in rejecting your own identity, which you should be proud of.
What is your view of where we are with this war right now?
Look, it's tragic. People think that, oh, I am pro-genocide and all this kind of stuff. I've got more Muslim friends than most people will ever meet. Any innocent person that is ever killed unnecessarily is a grotesque injustice, cosmically. But the reality is we have to look at what started all this, right? People have what I call amnesia of causality. They no longer remember that October 7th happened, right? Had we been today where we were on October 6th, none of this would have ever happened. And so, listen, you mess around, you find out what happened. It's regrettable that people are dying, but if the Palestinians were to existentially be willing to accept the fact that they're going to have Jewish neighbors, I think this problem would be solved in the future.
But that suggests that most Palestinians would be supportive of a two-state solution or living side by side peacefully alongside Jewish people. There's not much evidence that that is actually the case. I mean, Hamas still maintains huge support in all the polling from the majority of Palestinians.
Listen, there is a Pew survey that came out several years ago that looked at the rate of Jew hatred from many of these countries, Egypt, my homeland of Lebanon, Palestinian territories, Syria, and so on. And you have rates of endemic Jew hatred that vary from 95 to 99%. So we're not talking about an anomalous group of 3 out of 100 that hate the Jews. The great majority express hatred of the Jews, not Zionists, of Jews. And so as long as you have that ideological reality, you will never have peace. Once you get rid of that hatred, there is such richness in that region so that it will truly flourish.
Can you bomb a very small area like Gaza, where 50% of the population are under 18, killing thousands and thousands of children, and not expect there to be ongoing massive problems in terms of an ideological hatred of those who've done this?
I agree. It's almost an intractable problem. If they were to do nothing, that would be a problem. If they respond in the rather ferocious way that they have, they're going to lose the court of public opinion. So really, they truly are behind the proverbial rock, a rock and a hard place. In that, if they were to mitigate their response, that wouldn't be optimal. And if they respond maximally the way they are, endless innocent people are going to die. So I don't have a clear solution for that. I mean, do you have any better solution than anything that Israel's doing?
Well, this has been my refrain from the very start of this, which is I don't know what is proportionate for a response. If you are wedded to the idea of eliminating Hamas, a terror group of about 30 to 35,000 terrorists, if you're wedded to doing that and you have the vast support, as Netanyahu and his government do, from Israeli people to do that, and Hamas are embedded amongst civilian population in the way that they clearly are, I don't know how you achieve that mission end game without what they're doing and the inevitable casualties that come with it with civilians. The question is that going to be the right way to gain peace and security after all this? And that's where I have a real issue with what Israel's doing, because they're losing international support very quickly, even the support of the Americans, right to the highest level, the president. And by flattening most of Gaza and killing tens of thousands of innocent civilians as well as Hamas terrorists, and now pushing them all into a refugee camp where you're now planning to attack that as well, I just don't know how this doesn't all just end very, very badly, an almighty social and political mess. And I see no prospect of peace anytime soon in my lifetime.
Regrettably, and I hate to say it because I'm a very optimistic guy, a very jovial guy, a guy who wrote a book on happiness, I share your pessimism. And I'm very, very regretful to say so, but I think I share your view.
It's very sad. Let's move on to something which is more kind of entertaining, I think, than something we should take too seriously. But Don Lemon, who, full disclosure, I worked at CNN with him when I worked there. In fact, he got my old office when I left. But I've always got on fine with Don. He got fired by CNN. Elon Musk rises to the rescue like the cavalry. He says, I'll give you a show on X, pays him a few $1 million to do this. And I know some of the team Don has. They used to work with me. All seemed very, very positive for Don and a great comeback story for him. And then he decided to do Elon Musk, the owner, obviously, of X, as his first guest. Elon agrees, and it all goes horribly wrong. And this is one of the many awkward moments in the interview.
Hate speech on the platform is up. Do you believe that X and you have some responsibility to moderate hate speech on the platform? That you wouldn't have to answer these questions from reporters about the Great Replacement Theory as it relates to Democrats?
I don't have to answer these questions.
The Great Replacement Theory as it relates to Jewish people. Do you think that?
I don't have to answer questions from reporters. Don, the only reason I'm doing this interview is because you're on the X platform and you asked for it. Otherwise, I would not do this interview.
So you don't think? Do you think that you wouldn't get in trouble or you wouldn't be criticized for these things?
I'm criticized constantly. I could care less.
You know, what was interesting to me, Gab, was I had an interview with Elon lined up in early January, which he cancelled at the last minute when he discovered, from a random tweet, actually, by somebody who tweeted this. It was a clip from an interview I'd done a month before with a guy called Zuby. And we were debating whether Elon should have let Alex Jones back onto the platform. The guy who, of course, defamed all the Sandy Hook parents. Now, I covered that story in America at the time. I was very personally invested in it. We'd had a similar thing in Britain with 16 children killed in Dunblane in Scotland. I was a newspaper editor at the time. I led a campaign to have a lot of guns banned in Britain, which happened. And we've not had a mass shooting pretty much since then. I think there's been one mass shooting in the next 30 or so years. And I'm very proud of that. So this was personal to me, albeit in a country where the culture is very different when it comes to guns. But I then cut forward to Alex Jones and what he said about the Sandy Hook families, pouring misery onto their grief and ending up with $1 billion defamation finding against him. And I felt for all those reasons, Elon's original instinct, which was to not let him back on X when he was first asked about it, was correct. And his decision to reverse that was wrong. Now, I didn't think that was particularly contentious, nor would it be remotely surprising to anybody who'd followed me reporting on this story before, or Alex Jones. Alex Jones had a petition to have me deported from America, literally wanted me cancelled from the entire country. So I felt all was fair in love and war. But Elon said, no, I've lost respect for you, I'm cancelling our interview, despite never having met me. And I only tell that story again because it kind of puts into context what went down with Don Lemon. I think Elon is a genius. I think he's one of the smartest people in the world. He's certainly one of the richest and most successful. I think generally he's a force for good. I think if you look at Tesla, SpaceX, and the way he's trying to go about making X a genuine platform of free speech, I'm completely supportive of him in these missions. But he clearly does have a very thin skin. And when I watched large swathes of that interview with Don Lemon did that interview exactly how I expected Don Lemon to do it. I'm just surprised that Elon was taken by surprise.
Well, so I don't presume to speak for Elon, although we have, I'm happy to report, become good friends, very friendly. We chatted recently and so on. Look, I'm not sure that Elon has a thick skin. I think he's got a huge bullseye on him. He gets attacked more times than a human mind could fathom. And he proceeds to be a very productive and, as you said, a historically important person. Now, from my perspective, if you have the chance to sit down with arguably one of the most sought after people in the world, then maybe you should approach it with a bit of pragmatism, right? There is a smugness, there is an entitlement, there's an obnoxiousness, there's a oozing chutzpah that can, and you don't have to be a fancy evolutionary psychologist to pick that up in Don Lemon. So if I were sitting, and I'm also someone who's not particularly thin-skinned, but I do have honor, I would be pissed if I'm giving you my very valuable time and you don't use it in a more appropriate manner, right? When I sat down with Elon, we were joking around, but we also discussed some very interesting things. But the reason why he was relaxed is because he knew that there was not going to be a gotcha moment. I just want to explore your brilliant mind. Let's have a fun, instructive conversation. And from that perspective, I think that Don blew it.
You know, the irony is that's exactly the kind of interview I wanted to have with Elon. And I've messaged him saying, look, can we have another go at this? Because I genuinely have always been very supportive of him. It was only the Alex Jones thing. I mean, out of interest, what was your view of Alex Jones? I mean, do you think there should be a limit on the kind of people that are allowed on X?
No, I'm actually very much, Pierce, a free speech absolutist. And the example that I like to give is, despite my personal history in the Middle East, despite being Jewish, I support the right of Holocaust deniers to spew their endless nonsense. And so you can't be a free speech absolutist and say, no, but not for this case. I'm a free speech absolutist, but not for Donald Trump. I believe in journalistic integrity, but not when it comes to Hunter Biden's laptop, in which case we should have all colluded to suppress it. That's what a consequentialist ethic is. That's wrong, right? There are certain principles that have to be deontological, meaning they're absolute foundational positions that you never violate, short of the regular caveats. You can't defame, you can't directly incite to violence, right? You could criticize Judaism all you want till pigs fly, but you can't say, let's go to the corner of 6th and Broadway and kill the Jews when they come out of the synagogue. Short of that, all bets are off. Anything is allowed to be said, and let better ideas defeat idiotic.
What if you've spewed lies about the families of people who had their children murdered in school? I mean, Elon's initial position on that was he wouldn't let people who stand on the graves of dead children on the platform who made money.
So I'm not a lawyer, so I hope I'm not misspeaking, but then wouldn't the mechanism of a lawsuit on defamation be something that would resolve that? So in other words,
well, that's the point. My point was they did sue the families and they won $1 billion in the defamation case, one of the biggest awards in history. Alex Jones, to date, I don't think has paid $1 to the families. And just to remind people who may not be familiar with what he did, he deliberately lied about the event being staged by actors, that it was all a fake, the government had been behind it and so on. He actually exposed some of the family members to abuse in the streets, to threats. In one case, people turned up at the graveside of one of the poor children who got blown to pieces at school and urinated on the tombstone because they believed the whole thing was a fake. And I just felt that in totality, that made somebody who should not be given a platform, actually, like X. And I agree with Elon's first view about it. That's why I found his kind of, what I perceived to be an overreaction to cancelling our interview on that one thing, a little bit surprising, because to me, there are some limits. I mean, if Adolf Hitler was on X right now, spewing his hateful views of Jewish people, I would assume that Elon Musk would have him removed.
It's going to shock you what I'm going to say. By the way, there are endless, on any given day, incredible anti-Semites that come after me, and yet I would never presume to call Elon and say, hey, Elon, you should see the stuff that they're saying about me. Please take them off. And so I walk the walk and I talk the talk.
Yeah.
Part of being in a free society is to be able to withstand cretins, falsehood spreaders, liars, racists, Jew haters. Again, as long as you don't defame, as long as you don't directly incite to violence, all bets are off.
I want to play a little clip from your interview with Elon. This is about where he talks about optimism v pessimism.
All of these parasitic ideas originated from, the university ecosystem. So can we be optimistic that we could turn this thing around, Elon, or are we just screaming in the wind?
Well, I think we have to be optimistic. I agree with my general philosophy is that it's better to be on the side of being optimistic and wrong than pessimistic and right.
There was also another bit I like on fame, happiness and money. And you put to him the thesis of your new book, the happiness and money are only linked up to a point below $100,000. And he actually agreed with you, which given he's worth about $250 billion was quite funny. Let's take a listen.
In fact, I'd say there's a decrease in happiness that occurs when the fame level exceeds that which is useful. So, like, there's certain, modicum of fame where you can now get, it's easy to get a reservation at a restaurant.
Right.
You want that level of fame and not anything beyond it.
I kind of know what he means. It's like having been anonymous and famous, never as famous as him, obviously, but having experienced both. There's a lot to be said for anonymity, and once you lose it, you never really get it back, however hard you try. And Elon Musk is impossibly famous now, staggeringly rich, the victim of a lot of hate, as you say, and death threats. And I do think he's trying to be a force for good in the world. I think that's his driving, motivating factor. You got an amazing response to a tweet, which Elon retweeted this week.
Right.
It's had 30 million views. And you just said that illegal immigrants better than legal citizens, criminals better than victims, squatters better than homeowners, transgender women better than women, twerking drag queens better than children. And you made the point that if you subscribe to this, then we really are going to hell in a handcar. Were you taken by surprise by the response?
I mean, in the sense that it always amazes me that today you can put out a tweet and 30 million people can view it. I mean, let's contextualize that in comparison to the velocity at which things move in scientific knowledge. If I publish a peer-reviewed paper and it is successful, it means typically, Pierce, that 5 years after it's published, it might be cited by 100 other scholars. Right. So I need to work 3 to 5 years on a project and go through a very, very rigorous peer review process to hope that 100 of my scientific colleagues pay attention to my work. I put up a tweet and it gets shown by 30 million people, which, by the way, creates a conundrum for academics like me, because while I remain very much committed to the idea of publishing scientific papers, it's tough to walk away from the influence that you can wield by using social media platforms today. So I try to thread that needle as best as I can.
There was one other bit from the interview you did with Elon this week, which I liked. This was about the doomsday scenario. If AI is allowed to continue being obviously transparently woke. Let's take a listen to this.
It's going to be leading to some pretty dangerous and bizarre outcomes. And it could actually, like, if it's been taught like that misgendering is worse than nuclear war, it may decide that to avoid misgendering, it should start a nuclear war. That's the surefire way to stop any future misgendering is to kill all humans.
Right, exactly.
Problem solved. No more misgendering.
I mean, he's kind of joking, but he's kind of not. I think if AI does become sentient and it's being guided by very woke minds, human minds, to think a certain way, then it really could be Armageddon, couldn't it?
Absolutely. And I mean, I think one of the reasons why my 2020 book, The Parasitic Mind, resonated so much with people is because I basically argue, and I think that's one of the ways that Elon and I first connected. He also argues that the woke mind virus is arguably the greatest existential threat that humanity faces, because all of the tragedies that we typically think of originally start off in the mind of some deranged lunatic, right? Whether it be Hitler or whether it be the super progressive academics that have been poisoning the minds of our children, it results in a departure from reason. So I think Elon and I see eye to eye when we say that much bigger than the COVID virus are the mind viruses that are burrowing in our brains.
Talking of mind viruses, we've got this big debate at the moment raging about Sydney Sweeney, who's this breakout star, particularly since a recent appearance on Saturday Night Live, and Dylan Mulvaney, who's a breakout star for slightly different reasons. And a meme went viral showing a picture of Sydney Sweeney next to Dylan Mulvaney and asking, which way Western man? To which you responded on X by saying Sydney Sweeney is breathtaking. So are we right in thinking you've taken sides there, Gad?
While, of course, I have since learned that for me to have picked a woman that had a vagina rather than a penis made me transphobic, I still couldn't help but allow my biological imperative to find Sweeney slightly more attractive than the equally beautiful other woman with a penis.
How did your wife respond to your obvious, overwhelming adoration of Sydney Sweeney?
We are in negotiations right now to see if I am allowed a hall pass were Sydney Sweeney to become available.
I think there might be quite a long queue of men trying to get that hall pass. It's interesting, the Dylan Mulvaney thing, because I'm pretty cynical about it, I have to say. You've got someone who was an openly self-declared gay man to their mid-20s, suddenly decides they want to identify as a woman, and then spends the next 2 years apparently mocking womanhood and making it sound very imbecilic and pathetic, frankly, including a latest pop video reaffirming that that's Dylan Mulvaney's view. What do you think of this? I mean, should we just, as a society, be compelled to go along with this and say, well, obviously, if Dylan Mulvaney says that they're a woman, we should call them she and say they're a woman? Or do we as a society say, actually, if you're going to mock women like this and you were a gay man to your mid-20s, we're just not having it?
No, as a matter of fact, both Jordan Peterson and I appeared in 2017 in front of the Canadian Senate, where we exactly warned about the slippery slope that was coming, right? I can be fully empathetic to the rights of people to live free of bigotry, as I do, right? I mean, if you want to be transgender, go for it. But that doesn't mean that you take me on a ride to celebrate your unique personhood, right? You don't get to remove from my passport my marker as a biological male because you might be upset because you're a non-binary person that doesn't subscribe to the typical antiquated binary norms, right? So again, I can walk and chew gum at the same time. I can be empathetic to the fact that you should live free of bigotry, but that doesn't mean that I have to orgiastically celebrate your delusion.
Yeah, I think I'm with you. Now, there's a very female perspective has gone viral on Sydney Sweeney. This is about what women should do to men like yourself, Gad, who may have a slight obsession with Sydney.
Aw, your boyfriend has a crush on Sydney Sweeney? You should break up with him so he can go date her. Oh, he doesn't have a chance with her. Oh, that's not... Okay, he doesn't have a chance with her, but he's obsessing over her, even though he has a real-life relationship with you. What a weirdo that he's obsessing over women that he has no chance with at the expense of his relationship with you. You should break up.
Gad, are you concerned that Mrs. Sad may have seen that clip and got some ideas?
I actually, just so that I could be in the clear, when I made the proclamation of my admiration for Sweeney, I retweeted that and I tagged my wife. I don't know if you saw it. That way, if she were to now attack me, I say, but sweetie, I was completely open with you. So you can't last in a 24-year marriage if you don't know how to be a bit Middle Eastern in your way. So I've got it handled.
A bit Middle Eastern. Funny enough, I had my DNA tested a few years ago, and I have got I've got a tiny bit of Middle Eastern in me. And so
that's why you're good looking.
I might try that with my wife and just say, I was just using a bit of Middle Eastern, see how that goes down.
Let's see. Let me know.
Gad, it's great to catch up with you. Please come back again soon. I really enjoyed it.
Thank you. That was great. Thank you, Pierce.
Take
Cheers.
care. All the best.